Ladies and gentlemen, if you please begin taking your seats. The ceremony will begin shortly. At this time, we ask that all personal electronic devices be turned off and silenced. The site for today's ceremony and the surrounding flight line is considered a no hat and no salute area. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, good afternoon. On behalf of the Commander, Operations Group, Colonel John Martin, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the B-1 Bone Tail 99 Ruptured Duck christening ceremony. I am Captain Laney from the 37th Bomb Squadron and will be serving as your Master of Ceremonies. Today, along with Captain Ivy from the 28th Operations Support Squadron, Ellsworth Air Force Base, South Dakota. At this time, we will take a moment to recognize some of our distinguished guests and visitors who have joined us today. Doolittle Raider, Colonel Sidney Colchaw. Family of the late Doolittle Raider, David Thatcher, wife Dawn, son Jeff, daughter Sandy, and Becky. Raider Business Manager, Tom Casey, and his wife Catherine. Daughter of Honorary Raider Tong Sheng Liu, Melinda Liu, and her husband Alan Babington Smith. Commander, 88th Air Base Wing and Installation Commander Colonel Bradley McDonald and his wife Krista. Commander, 28th Operations Group, Ellsworth Air Force Base, South Dakota, Colonel John Martin. Commander, 34th Bomb Squadron, Ellsworth Air Force Base, South Dakota, Lieutenant Colonel Seth Spanier. Thank you for joining us today.
The ceremony of christening new ships began in the distant past. Earliest references were from the Romans, Greeks, and Egyptians holding ceremonies to ask the gods to protect their sailors. By the 1800s, the christenings began to follow a familiar pattern, and the most recognizable action was a christening fluid being poured onto the bow of the ship. The tradition developed that a female would do the honors by pouring the most elite of fluids. It is a long-held superstition that if a ship was not properly christened, it would be considered unlucky. For today, we have the honor of witnessing the christening of Tail 99, the Ruptured Duck, and providing for the safe flight of all future airmen who fly this aircraft. The B-25 Tail 61, the Ruptured Duck, would be the 7th Mitchell aircraft to launch off the deck of the USS Hornet on 18 April 1942 during the famous Doolittle Raid. It would strike a steel mill and other factories before crash landing off the coast of China. I am proud to see the legacy of the Ruptured Duck being represented by the nose art on the B-1. It recognizes the rich history of the Doolittle Raid, which is what brings us here today. And now I have the distinct honor to welcome the son of the Ruptured Duck's flight engineer, Jeff Thatcher.
Good afternoon. On behalf of our family, thank you all for being here. We're honored to represent my late father, Doolittle Raider David J. Thatcher of crew number 7, and thrilled to participate in this special event. Crew number 7 consisted of pilot Lieutenant Ted Lawson, co-pilot Lieutenant Dean Davenport, navigator Lieutenant Charles McClure, bombardier Lieutenant Robert Clever, and my father, engineer gunner Corporal David Thatcher, all members of the Kicking Mules, the 95th Bomb Squadron of the 17th Bomb Group. In his book, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, Lawson wrote that in early March 1942, when crew number 7 was training for the Doolittle Raid at Eglin Field in Florida, he went out one morning to their plane and found someone had chalked the words "Ruptured Duck" on the side of the fuselage. Lawson grabbed Corporal Roger Lovelace, a gunner he knew who was also in training for the raid, and asked Lovelace to paint some sort of design on the ship. Lovelace, whom Lawson considered a good caricaturist, and then painted a funny-looking Donald Duck with a head on cords twisted all around his head in blue, yellow, white, and red. Under Donald Duck's image, he painted a couple of crossed crutches. and this is a rendition of the image. Crew number 7 trained through March 23rd at Eglin Field, practicing short-run takeoffs and low-altitude bombing runs on designated targets. On March 24th, they flew to San Antonio and then hedge-hopped their way across the country before finally reaching Alameda, California, where the plane landed on the field, taxied off, and parked at the edge of the Hornet alongside the other bombers to be loaded onto the carrier's deck. Early the morning of April 18, 1942, crew number 7 took off the deck of the Hornet and flew about 600 miles by dead reckoning just above the wave tops before coming over the coast of Japan at noon, where the crew looked down and saw a Japanese who had misidentified their plane waving at them and cheering. The following quotes are from my father when I interviewed him in July 2015. Between the coast and Tokyo, we met a formation of 6 Japanese planes. They just kept going. I was keeping my eyes out for enemy aircraft when we ascended from 50 feet to 1,500 feet before dropping 3 500-pound demolition bombs and a 500-pound incendiary cluster made up of 126 individual bombs. It was designed to start fires, and it came apart as soon as we dropped it. After we dropped the bombs, we headed out over Tokyo Bay. We still had a lot of gas, but a long way to go. We flew southwest, following the coast until heading west to China. We were flying over the China Sea and figured we would make it to a designated airport in China, but then the weather turned bad. Their fuel running low, the crew realized they had to parachute out or try to land the plane. Lacking enough gas to get up to 10,000 feet, Lawson decided to attempt a landing on a strip of beach he saw below. Instead, the plane hit a wave with its wheels down, and the plane stopped suddenly, flipping over and throwing the 4 officers out the front. Dad was in the back. The crash seriously injured the members of the crew, except Dad, who was briefly knocked out. After regaining consciousness, struggling free from the wreckage, and stumbling up through the breakers, Dad reached the other crew members who had washed up on shore. He gathered them together in a cold, driving rainstorm. Friendly Chinese fishermen who had witnessed the crash and come down to the beach were convinced to carry the injured crew to a rough hut on the cliff above, where Dad bound the crew's wounds with a bandage from his first aid kit, his handkerchief, and Chinese rags. The next day, Charlie, a local guerrilla leader who spoke some English, agreed to have guerrillas that had accompanied him build rough wooden stretchers and carry the injured officers to the other side of the island. That night, the group secured a sampan and carried the crew past searching Japanese gunboats to the mainland. During an arduous journey inland to safety and needed medical care, of terrible days and nights of excruciating pain for the injured officers, the group barely escaped capture by Japanese patrols searching furiously for them. Throughout, my father looked after his officers. For his bravery in saving their lives, he was awarded the Silver Star. One could argue that the Ruptured Duck was one of the most famous planes on the Doolittle Raid, after Lawson in 1943 wrote the first account of the raid with author Bob Considine, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, which became a best-selling book and was later made into a movie by the same name. What could not be argued is the symbolic and cruel twist of fate Lawson endured after the plane's moniker had been established. After his left leg became infected with gangrene from the injuries he sustained in the crash, it had to be amputated on May 4th, 1942 by Raider physician and crew number 15 gunner Doc White at the Linghai Enza Clinic in China. Lawson was on crutches afterwards. 75 years ago tomorrow, we will celebrate the anniversary of the Doolittle Raid, when crew 7 took off from the deck of the carrier USS 25B bomber, along with the 15 other crews comprising the historic mission to bomb Tokyo and 4 other Japanese cities in retaliation for Japan's surprise attack of December 1941 on Pearl Harbor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thatcher. And now we will reveal the Ruptured Duck as it is today. Removing the cover will be Miss Becky Thatcher, and with the assistance of the Ruptured Duck dedicated crew chief, Technical Sergeant William Hatton. have to say, that is some really cool artwork. That's just too cool. All right, to mark the occasion, and to dispel bad luck, Don Thatcher and Sandy Thatcher Miller will christen the reincarnation of the Ruptured Duck. They will be pouring 3 fingers of Hennessy upon the gear of the aircraft. Sir.
It's tough duty. By the way, the glass from the final toast at the 71st Raider reunion.
This action commemorates a single plane of 16, which symbolizes all the men of the Doolittle Raid who flew into the unknown fate and who completed their mission with valor. The crews will fly in the new Ruptured Duck and carry the legacy of all the Doolittle Raider crews into the future as part of the defense of the United States of America. And now I have the privilege of welcoming Colonel John Martin for the closing remarks.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. What a gorgeous day, huh? Fantastic. Nice job, guys. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. It is with sincere gratitude that I stand before you today accepting this christening of the new Ruptured Duck. What a privilege to stand with the wife and family of Sergeant David Thatcher, Colonel Dick Cole and his family, 2 bomber legends and heroes from an epic point in American wartime folklore. Thank you for the opportunity. I would also like to thank Mr. Tom Casey, the Doolittle Raiders business manager, and I like to thank a personal friend. Thank you to Mr. Jeff Thatcher and your words today, the 88th Air Base Wing Public Affairs Office, the National Museum of the Air Force, SAF PA, and Captains Ivy and Laney for helping set up today's event. They even had the foresight to set up the wind so that my hair would blow this way, so it's top-notch stuff. The Ruptured Duck and other nose art like Avenger and Whiskey Pete in the Raid are like the 34th and 37th patches you see themselves along the side of the aircraft. They're like icons that remain the connective tissue between the Doolittle Raid and its professional posterity of today. They connect past with present and present with future. On April 18th, 1942, 75 years tomorrow, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle led these 2 fine squadrons and 2 others in this nation's first retaliatory strikes against Japan after Pearl Harbor. Today's modern Raiders of the 34th and 37th Bomb Squadron, many here today, proudly continue that legacy of leadership. Like the famous raid that followed Pearl Harbor, these 2 squadrons were called to arms on September 11th, 2001. Once again, evildoers attacked this nation in a manner that was equally sinister and surprising. President Bush sagely captured the pulse of the nation when he stated, "Great harm has been done to us. We have suffered great loss, and in our grief and anger, we have found our mission and our moment." President Bush's message resonated effortlessly throughout the military. Just like after Pearl Harbor, America had a sovereign right to defend herself. The mission had never been clearer. 9/11 was our modern-day moment. The new machine we flew was the B-1 Bone, and the men and women who flew her were the 21st century members of the 34th and 37th Bomb Squadrons. I looked a little bit like that duck on my first sortie. So in late September of 2001, bones from the 34th and 37th Bomb Squadrons deployed to Diego Garcia from Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota to defend this great nation. Operating Enduring Freedom commenced with the 34th Expeditionary Bomb Squadron as the lead B-1 unit. I had the profound honor of partaking in that historic deployment, as well as several since then. From the opening retaliatory strikes against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, B-1 air power dominated the skies over Afghanistan, while flying only 5% of the missions on this first OEF deployment. These two squadrons dropped 39% of the precision-guided munitions in the opening months of the conflict, effectively becoming the hammer to our ground forces' anvil. Due in no small part to the air power brought to bear, U.S. forces removed the Taliban government only a mere month after OEF began. 16 years later, we continue to be a nation at war, and the Bone has been providing air support in Southwest Asia for most of that time. In 2003, the 34th Expeditionary Bomb Squadron was the lead B-1 unit in Operation Iraqi Freedom, which ultimately led to the ousting of Saddam Hussein. Continuing the legacy of combat power projection, in March of 2011, the 34th Bomb Squadron supported Operation Odyssey Dawn with the first B-1 combat sorties launched from the continental U.S. These sorties struck Libya with more than 90 weapons in 72 hours' time. The 34th launched from South Dakota, struck targets en route, landed overseas, rearmed, refueled, launched again, attacked Libyan targets, and returned home. No other nation can match this feat in distance, volume, and ability to strike around the globe on such short notice. In 2015 to 2016, the 37th Bomb Squadron pounded ISIS with 5,037 bombs, becoming Operation Inherent Resolve's combat heavy hitter in Syria. The Tigers enabled the liberation of Ramadi, Sinjar, and Hasaka, real benefit to humanity. The 37th Bomb Squadron was selected for a Secretary of Defense-approved bank strike, destroying $92 million of ISIS holdings. In the weeks that followed, the Islamic State cut salaries by half. Desertion skyrocketed. The Tigers went Winchester, dropping all of their 20 bombs 43 times on that deployment. They were nominated by the Air Force for the 2016 AFA Citation of Honor Award, testament to the squadron's superior performance on the battlefield. They are being considered for the Gallant Unit Citation Award, today's Outstanding Unit Award for Combat Valor. Finally, the Tigers won the 2015 Curtis LeMay Award for the most outstanding bomber air crew in the Air Force, an award that Ellsworth has won 8 times in the last 20 years, more than the B-2 and B-52 combined in that time span. From August 2016 to February 2017, the 34th Bomb Squadron returned triumphantly to the Pacific, supporting the Pacific Commander's continuous bomber presence mission. During that B-1 deployment, the first one to the Pacific in over 10 years, 34th executed 278 sorties, achieving a 100% higher headquarters mission effectiveness rate. The 34th aircrew participated in exercises Valiant Shield, Keen Sword, and Jungle Shield. Additionally, the Thunderbirds completed the closest B-1 flight to the demilitarized zone in history in response to North Korea's largest nuclear test in September of last year, a feat lauded by the President, Secretary of the Air Force, Commander of U.S. Pacific Command, and Commander of United States Forces in Korea. Ladies and gentlemen, on the wings of aircraft like the new Ruptured Duck, the 34th and 37th Bomb Squadrons continue to write their own chapters in our nation's history, leading with valor and punctuating their mark with the emblems of the Raider. Thank you.
Would you like to give an hour at the end? Okay.
I have 4 flags with me today, flown for the members of the Thatcher family. They were flown on Sergeant Thatcher's memorial flyover last June, which was to be the first flight of the Ruptured Duck, as happenstance had it. A bit true to form, the Ruptured Duck ruptured a hydraulic line that morning. We had to go to an alternate aircraft, but we did fly these for your beloved husband and father on that day, and I wanted to present them to you. I have 2 lithos I'd like to give our dedicated crew chief and his assistant today that were flown on that sortie as well. Thanks, guys.
On behalf of my father, children of the Doolittle Raiders, I want to present this to you, John.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And then, do you want to say this? Also, Captain Donald Smith was from South Dakota, correct? And go ahead.
Captain Smith was from South Dakota. He was pilot of Crew 15. He was killed in action in November of '42, going over to do Operation Torch in North Africa. And he was from South Dakota, and the Raiders got the Congressional Gold Medal a few years back, and we're going to present it to the wing so that you can have it in your little museum that you have on base there.
Thank you so much.
So take good care of it. He's also the Raider that got off on land in less than 289 feet with a loaded B-25. So
That's incredible. Thank you so much.
thank you.
And we've also got a special presentation for the 2 captains. Hennessy engraved a couple of bottles for us. This one says 75th anniversary Ruptured Duck. I want to present this to Coyote Laney.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
And that other one. And the other bottle is for the other squadron. It has Doolittle Raiders 75th anniversary, and I want to present this to Knox Ivy.
Well, thank you for attending this memorial event. On behalf of the men and the women of the 28th Operations Group, the 80th Air Refueling Wing, and the family and friends of the Doolittle Raid, thank you for attending.